Okay, everyone, happy Friday and happy Easter long weekend. This is the fifth knowledge webinar we've had so far. And today I'll be focusing on analyzing Facebook campaigns. And so this is really relevant to part two of your Run Your Facebook Campaign project. So the agenda for today is talking about some of the campaign pre-work. So you'll have seen from your projects, you've been asked to set a couple objectives and KPIs. We'll talk about how that helps you when you're finally analyzing your total campaign results. We'll talk about some common Facebook campaign metrics and how those tie into your KPIs. And then we'll analyze a Facebook ad set results together just to see how you guys give you guys an example of how to take a look at an ad set that's showing a couple different things. At the end, we'll talk about some of our plans for the next week. So starting with the campaign pre-work. So doing some work, and as you've seen from your project, setting up your planning, your targets, your objectives and KPIs, those are all things that you'd want to do beforehand before you're running a campaign. And so you will have a good idea of what success will look like at the end result of your campaign, whether you've reached your goal or not. And so there's three things that I've identified that you should always have before you run a campaign, and that is the campaign objective. You should have a good idea of what you want to achieve at the end of your campaign, the KPIs, and so that's just the metrics that you'll use to determine whether you reached your goal or not. And the third one is a hypothesis. And I include this one because it's always good practice to um, just have an inclination on what you think will happen. And this kind of puts you into a test and learn mentality where you're treating every campaign as a test essentially. So you could have a hypothesis on, which ad you think is going to work best and why, or which target segment is going to perform the best and why. And usually, after you look at a campaign results, it'll be pretty clear whether you've reached your objective or not. But there's lots of other questions that come out of the data that you're seeing, at least more questions and potentially future tests and campaigns as well. So overall, I would say um, the analysis of the results really starts even before you run the campaign with this campaign pre-work. And so the next thing that I want to talk about are common campaign metrics. And there's a couple, I've grouped the metrics into a few different buckets: counting metrics, ratios, and cost and value metrics. And it's a good idea to just be familiar with the terms. Um, you can find all the definitions online on the Facebook for Business website. You can just type it in. And it's just a good idea to understand all of the metrics because there's only a few big ones, I would say. And I've outlined most of them within these next few slides. And so the first group of metrics that I want to talk about are the counting metrics. And so these give a good idea of the scale of your campaign. So these are reach, so the number of people who saw your ads at least once; the impressions, how often your ads are on screen for your target audience; clicks, that's pretty self-explanatory, the number of times that your ads were clicked; and the results. So the results are, the number of times you've achieved a certain outcome, and this differs based on the objectives of your campaigns. They could be purchases or subscriptions to your online service, or leads that you've driven for your sales team, or the number of times your app has been installed. Those could all be examples of different results, and they'll be different depending on your company and campaign. So the next bucket of metrics are ratios. And so when you're looking at the counting metrics before, they give a good idea of how your campaign is performing, but they don't tell you how efficiently you're doing it. And so that's where the ratios come in. So the first one is the click-through rates, the percentage of people who saw your ad and also clicked on a link. And so the click-through rate is great because if you focus on, if you optimize for this metric, then you're getting the most traffic possible. Um, but one of the downsides of click-through rates is that, if you're focusing on you getting large amounts of traffic to your website or your landing page, this metric doesn't discriminate against good or bad traffic. So you won't know, you might drive a lot of people to your site with this click-through rate, but you won't know if they actually complete the end result that you're looking for. And so similarly, the next ratio is the result rate, or commonly known as the conversion rate. So number of times that your ad achieved a result or outcome based on the number of people who have clicked your ad. So the click-through rate or the conversion rate is great at getting the most conversions possible once you get that click, but it doesn't look at um, the amount of traffic it takes to get there. And so if you're just focusing on the conversion rates, you might lose that sense of scale. So one example is if you have an ad that has a great conversion rate, but you're only getting a few results or a few sales out of that compared to another ad where you're getting tons and tons of results with a lower conversion rate, you kind of have to balance the two. And usually when you're when you're looking at multiple metrics like this, you're really balancing the efficiency versus scale. And then the third bucket of metrics that are commonly used are just cost and value. And these are going to be relevant for any company, small or large, the amount of ad spend, the money you're spending in your campaign, and then that amount of spent per result. So how much is it really costing you to get the results that you're looking for? And so the cost per result metric is great as it controls costs. And you're really kind of focusing on how much conversion costs to you, but at the same time, it doesn't take into account the volume of clicks um, or the conversion rate. And so you're kind of balancing it. I guess what I would say overall is when you're looking at these different metrics, they're all great in a certain way, and they'll all tell you something useful about your campaign, but they won't tell you the big picture, and they won't tell you the overall result. And so what you'll need to do is look at a few different metrics across these buckets to really analyze how, first of all, did you achieve your campaign objective, but also how did you achieve it? Were you efficient? Were you efficient with the clicks that you got, or were you efficient with the amount of money that you spent? And so it'd be a mix of looking at these different metrics to really analyze your campaign as a whole. And so the next slide, I have um, an ad set. And so I think I've actually taken this from Google AdWords, but this is very similar to what you'll see within Facebook. So we have 5 different ads here, the number of impressions, and from our previous slide, you remember this is just how many times your ad has been seen, the number of clicks to the ad, and then conversions or the end result. And we'll kind of pretend that those are, purchases, the cost or how much we spent per ad, the CTR or the click through rate, so the number of clicks per impressions, and the conversion rate, so number of conversions per clicks, and the CPA. And so this one, just think of it as a cost per result. So how much are we paying for a conversion? So in this first line here, we're looking at $20 CPA. We spent $20 per uh, 10 conversions, and with a total amount of spend of $200. So if you're following this at home, I would say maybe just take a pause on the video and just analyze the data that you're seeing here. And my question to you is, if you're seeing these results, what would you do with this data? Which ad would you want to optimize for? Is there one that you would say, yes, this is a clear winner in this set of ads, and I want to put most of my money towards this one ad? And so I'll just kind of walk you through my thinking um, as I look at this data. And so the first thing that I'm thinking about is what is my KPI? And usually, it's if you're looking at a set of data like this, it's going to be conversions. It's going to be that final end result. That's what I care about most. And so, looking at the fourth column, the number of conversions. There's a couple other um, ratios that I'd be looking at as well, the CTR and the conversion rates. And those are useful in telling me how effectively we drove, how efficiently we drove those conversions. And I think what you'll see is it's kind of hard to determine um, a clear winner. As if you just look at conversions, you might think that number five is the top performing ad. Looking at the conversion rate, you'll say that, you know what, number two is ad number two has the highest conversion rate, and that's what we'll focus on. And then if you look at the CPA, the very last column, the cost per conversion, maybe you'll think about, that's ad number four really is the one that we should be optimizing for. That's the best performing one. Those are the cheapest number of conversions, and if we put more money there, then um, that's the way you want to go. And so I would say this is fairly common. Usually there's no clear winner. That's, one ad that performs the best among, conversions, click conversion rates, cost per conversion. It just doesn't tend to happen that way, and you'll usually get a mixed result like this. And so, how I would analyze the set of results is that first I'll select um, a key number to identify, and that's I've already said is the conversions. I care most about the number of conversions that I'm driving. But the second layer that I would look at is, and it's probably pretty common as well, is the CPA. So the very last column, how much am I spending to get per conversion? And so you'll see that I have a couple. I'm kind of stuck between looking at number five that has the most conversions, and number four that has the lowest cost per result. And how I would think about this is, I want to get the most conversions, but at a certain cost threshold. And so that kind of helps me think about what is the most that I'm willing to spend in order to get the conversion that I need. And for any any ad that has a cost per conversion that's lower than my max, those would be the ones that I look at, and those are all the kind of the ads that I would be okay with performance wise, and then I would choose the one that has the highest conversions out of that group. So if I were to say um, the max that I would be willing to pay for a conversion is $20, I would remove um, at number three right away because that's just way too expensive. That's costing me way too much um, for a conversion. That leaves all the rest of the ads um, in play, and then I would look at the number of conversions and number five. Um, that has 12 conversions. That's got the most conversions, and that also has a CPA that I am okay with. And so um, that one would be, if in this given scenario, that's the ad that I would actually take away, um, and focus on and try to optimize, or maybe put more money into that one, as opposed to the others. And so definitely shoot me a message, if this kind of confuses you, or you maybe came up with a different um, hypothesis or different conclusion on your end. I'd love to hear what you guys had to say, and how you guys interpreted the data. But yeah, so I would say overall, you're going to see similar results like this. It's not going to be clear cut. One ad is clearly superior than the other. You'll have to look at it, by taking a few different metrics into account. Nope. Going back. So a couple tips that I have, um, that are going to help you analyze your data and make sure that the um, kind of the conclusions that you're driving are going to be valid. One is set a minimum data threshold, and so um, this sort of ties into the next one, which is statistical significance. But they're also kind of two different things, and so the gist of this one is, um, set a threshold for the amount of results that you want to see before you want to make a decision. And so, if you are, and this kind of ties into how big your budgets are, and how large your campaign is going to be. Um, campaign is going to be overall. Um, if you are running a campaign in the millions of dollars, and you're making judgments based on, dozens, or 50 clicks for each ad that you're looking at, you just don't, I guess the idea is, you don't want to have a few chance clicks really affect your data results. And so um, i would take I would take a look at that, and it's that usually you want to have a few hundred clicks or results, before you actually make want to make a decision. Um, and I could probably touch that a little later and go more in depth in a future webinar. And the second one, similarly, is the statistical significance. So there are lots of A/B calculators online. I don't want to get into um, how exactly this works, but you just want to check that the results that you're seeing are not um, just based on chance, and that they're actually a real result based on a real difference between um, the results that you're seeing. And so the 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 difference between the statistical significance and the minimum data threshold is that sometimes you'll have these smaller numbers, and if you plug it into a significance calculator, it'll tell you that the result is significant, but um, in actuality, there could be some things that sway it, and so you'll want to set a higher minimum data threshold than you'll see from these online calculators. And then the last point I just want to make is just to always be skeptical of data. And I say this out of experience, having been burned by this in the past. When you're analyzing results, you can often feel like you're excited, you want to share the results, you want to drive a lot of conclusions out of it. But it's always great to kind of just step back and question whether the results you're seeing are real or not. And this is partly to do with you making wrong um, kind of conclusions from the data, or that the data that you've collected is not necessarily um, correct from a kind of technical or tracking or reporting point of view. Just always be skeptical, because you'll see this in small companies, you'll see this in big companies. Getting and tracking reporting the right way is actually super difficult. And so reporting breaks down a lot. You know, different things can happen that can skew your data, and things are not getting tracked properly. And so just always be skeptical of the data that you're seeing. That's gonna, I guess, two things. It'll help make you a better marketer, and two, it'll help your kind of reputation within your company as well, as somebody who they can really be trustful when you're making judgments on data. Cool. So that's it. The most pressing deadline is on Tuesday, so April 23rd, as when the second half of the Run a Facebook campaign project is due. I've got a pretty wide availability for one-on-ones next week, so Monday to Friday as well as Sunday, and then I will have another knowledge webinar around the same time. Um, as usual next week, so Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And I believe that one will be focused more on SEO, as that's the next module. Cool. Thank you guys. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.